How would I describe Oscar?
That's a good question.
Outgoing person.
Yeah, I mean, I think Pete's
funny.
pretty forthright.
That's a difficult question.
He knows what he thinks, and he's very honest. I think he's also a very open person.
We never video Skyped, I should say that. It was purely audio telephone calls between us. I tried to be very disciplined and work in the mornings, but I'm much more of a nighttime person. For this project it worked very well because of the time difference between the States and Europe, which meant that when Oscar was there in the morning chatting to me, it was the late afternoon over here, where I tend to be the most awake.
When it comes to writing, Pete has some amazing conceptual ideas, which is something that that I don't really do. So, because I remember when we were in The Hague, and he did a whole piece. I was actually in it, which involved the performance on stage bowing. And then right after I left, he did another piece, which was for cars. I mean, I think he got cars into the
unpredictable.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I think we're both English and we both share a similar sense of humor. And
well, Cage, I mean, it's so hard to Cage is sort of so many things. He's
very important.
He's so hard to classify, because
maybe there's something also linking to Oscar and I both being English, and there's a sort of embracing of humor not necessarily being cheap. I think he said that when he was younger, he thought that writing music was all about finding the answers, and as he got older, he realized it was just about asking questions.
If I had to really pin it down, I think that Cage represents a kind of an openness to things, rather than a solution. He kind of represents possibilities. That's
we wanted to try to do something properly together, where we couldn't split off the music and say, "Oh, that's my telephone ringing. Hang on."
And actually, when we were working together, one problem that we found right at the beginning is we were trying to think like each other. Like we were actually trying to think, oh, what would I was thinking, well, what would Pete say about this? And he was thinking, well, what would Oscar say about this? And it was fine. And then at a certain point, we realised that we shouldn't do that. That actually we should just think for ourselves and not try and second guess what the other person how the other person was going to react.
Let's start that answer again. Yeah, I think the first thing that Oscar and I decided, or both wanted to try to do when we started talking about the project, was to do something not like The Cage, in a way that the music is clearly split between the two composers, where they can each pick out various notes and say, I wrote that one. And we wanted to, well, in a way, make our lives that much more difficult and do something properly collaborative.
At the beginning, I thought, but then there's another section, and I was like, this is definitely my piece. So I'm guessing that the other stuff is Pete's stuff.
Oh, if Oscar and I had thought of that, we could have said this was a whole lot of a summer of work.
So it's like a Frankenstein's monster of our music. Right?
I think it's rather effective. I think it's rather good.
I mean, I guess, yeah.
Maybe not better.
Although we had no part of it.
But
I mean, in making it double, it's 1 + 1. But I don't know if that makes it double.
No, actually, I think it's the opposite of the way Oscar and
I was thinking about that, and I was thinking, the piece that we wrote is totally different to that. Our piece is actually, I mean, I think Pete will say the same thing. I think that our piece is something that that neither of us would have written apart. We definitely is something that we wrote together, but it has, I mean, I think you can hear both of us in that piece. I recognized a couple of chords in there. I thought, those sounds like Pete chords, That sound like Pete chords.
Talkative. We should add talkative to the list of how to describe Oscar.
Maybe I'm just such a pessimist that I'm actually an optimist. Do you know what I mean? Like, I have such a grim view that, you know, it's always better than that, you know? It's like, I'm always pleasantly surprised by most things.